Do you know that we forget most of our dreams? Psychologists have long since proven that we actually dream every time we fall asleep, though most of these dreams are forgotten as soon as we wake up. So the question here is, what's the point of having dreams if you can't remember them? Psychologists explain that this seemingly unreasonable forgetfulness is caused by the inactivity of some parts of the brain during sleep, but that's not the truth. The real reason is that we see and hear things in our dreams that are forbidden to the human perception. In other words, things that are simply too much to bear for our mind and soul. And if we don't forget about them, they drive us insane. However, should you wake someone up in the midst of a dream, he'll remember every bit of the dream he is having. Never, ever do this, because it may kill him. To illustrate my point, let me tell you about a strange experience I had 3 years ago. I was living in an apartment in downtown Sydney at the time. My roommate was a man named David. When we first met each other, he told me that many people had refused to share a suite with him because of his especially loud sleep-talking, but I didn't mind. You see, I had served in the Navy for 5 years, and after over 1,800 nights of sleeping in a cabin right next to our ship's engine room, there was literally nothing loud enough to disturb me in my sleep. I told David so, and he was so pleased that he offered to pay 60% of the rent, which I gladly accepted. Our first 3 months together went extremely well. David was a great company. Not only was he a master cook, but a man of great compassion and humor as well. He wore the most friendly smile at all times, and was always ready to engage in a pleasant conversation. As for his deep sleep-talking, well, frankly, I had to say that I heard none of it because I'm in the habit of going to bed before 11 p.m., while David usually stayed up until about 1. Sometimes, David would warn me never to wake him up while he was sleep-talking. I asked him why. I don't know. Instincts, I guess. He only shrugged. I agreed. With my usual schedule, it's not likely that I'll ever get to hear him sleep-talking anyways. However, a few more months passed. The World Cup began. Now, as I've already told you, I'm usually accustomed to going to bed early, but I'm also one of your typical soccer fans who are always willing to stay up late for a game. That night, I bought a bag of snacks and some beer, and invited David to join me in cheering for the Australian team. He seemed quite disturbed by this. "Mark, I think I may as well skip the game. After all, I'm not too much of a soccer fan," he said hesitantly. "But the problem is, should you stay up tonight, you're bound to hear me sleep-talking." "Don't worry, man, I'll just ignore you." That seemed to reassure him. "Alright, just remember, do not wake me up whatever you hear." "Sure, good night." The game that night was awesome. So awesome that it made me forget all about David and his sleep-talking. However, at exactly 3 in the morning, a horrible moan from his room almost sent me bouncing off the sofa. It was the groan of souls trapped in hell, guttural, deep, and filled with despair. David's voice was pleasant and somewhat chirpy, but this was something else entirely. Keeping David's words in mind, I tuned up the volume of the TV and tried to ignore the creepy groans coming out of his bedroom. It didn't work. The groans just grew louder and louder until they eventually merged into a steady, choked scream. Now you may wonder how come I could stay asleep with David making that much noise every night. But then again, that's because you've never been aboard a Navy warship. Have you ever heard the noise of a cruiser's engine? This was the loudest buzz that anyone could ever imagine, booming like gunshots when fired right next to your ears. Now just think, as a Navy soldier, I'd spent 5 years living under that kind of noise. Now, do you understand? After a while, when the groans had not stopped, I began to grow worried. What if David was having a heart attack and struggling for his life in that bedroom right now? I had to go in there and check on him. So I put down my beer and ran towards his room. After knocking on the door for several times without getting any response, I turned the knob carefully and walked in. There lay David with his face towards the door, and his expression was unspeakable. His bloodshot eyes seemed to be bulging out of their sockets, and his lips were upturned like that of a wild animal, revealing gritted teeth. His tongue lolled out of his mouth, dangling like the tongue of a man who had hanged himself with a rope. Seeing this sight of horror confirmed my suspicions that there was something wrong with my roommate, and that I must rush him to the hospital ASAP. That's when I made the mistake of trying to wake him. Hey, buddy, wake up! What the hell's wrong with you? The change on his face was almost instant. The eyes narrowed, and the bloodshot was gone. His tongue retracted into his mouth, and for a moment, there was my friend again, staring blankly up at me, as if dumbfounded. Then, all of a sudden, he leapt up from his bed and started screaming, "My God! I saw... What the fuck did I see? Oh God! Oh God!" He screamed as he banged his head against the wall so hard that it drew blood. I tried in vain to get a hold of him, but he was astonishingly strong. "I saw them, Mark! Oh my God, I saw them in my dreams! These things, they talk to me in my dreams, and I can see them so clearly! They tortured me, and... Oh fuck, those damn eyes! These hands!" He collapsed into a fetal position on the floor and began to weep like a boy. In the end, I called the hospital and they sent someone to pick him up. 2 weeks later, I read in the local newspaper that David had committed suicide in a mental institution. He had been staying awake for over 80 hours when he died, banging himself in the head or biting down hard on his arms whenever he felt sleepy. He was afraid of them, the beings that haunted him in his dreams. Now, because of me, he could remember. Now, do you see? If you caught your friend having a bad dream, never wake him up, or his blood will be on your hands. I've moved out of the apartment now and rented a smaller suite on the opposite side of the street. It's a humble place, and the facilities are generally unagreeable. But at least it's a suite that I can afford to rent by myself. You see, the problem is that I began to dream talk as well. Last week, my new roommate complained that I'd sometimes groan horribly in my sleep and even beg and weep as if I was being tortured. Maybe, just maybe, they're now coming after me as well.